Everybody, I think we're going to get started tonight. Really pleased and flattered by having such a nice crowd here. It's pretty much, I think we can all agree, the most beautiful time of the year in Salt Lake City. So the fact that you folks are coming out of a beautiful late spring, early summer evening and come in here to hear folks talk about carbon regulations and tar sands and water scarcity and concentrated solar is really welcome. So let's give ourselves a big applause for showing up here tonight. So my name is Matt Pacenza. I'm the policy director for HEAL Utah, and HEAL has organized tonight's Clean Energy Summit. We deliberately organized tonight's event sort of in advance of and counter to Governor Herbert's Energy Development Summit, which begins tomorrow evening, primarily takes place on Wednesday. And you're going to hear repeated references to that, and I'll speak about it as well in a moment. Let me just describe this evening's format so you guys know what's coming. So I'm going to speak for a few minutes, and then I'll turn it over to our panelists who will each speak for sort of reasonably briefly. I'll introduce them. They're going to speak in the order you see them there at the table, so that'll be very obvious to you. And then I'm betting between me and them speaking, we're going to go about 45 minutes. And that'll leave us about another 40 minutes for questions from you all. So the way we're going to do those questions, we want to make sure we sort of address the most provocative questions and have a good range of questions. So what we're going to ask you folks to do is to actually write your question down. And we at HEAL are so prepared that we have brought both the writing instruments and the paper. And because we're an environmental organization, the paper is actually a recycled paper object, which in this case is actually an envelope. So you may be confused why you're getting an envelope. You don't put anything in the envelope. Rather, you write the question on the exterior of the envelope. So Lindsay and Rob and Sophia, three HEAL folks, some combination of them, will begin to sort of distribute pens and envelopes. And basically, I think during the 40 minutes when we are all addressing you, just whatever pops to your head, you go ahead and write that question down. Whatever thought you have that you want to have answered. And then we'll go through those. We'll pick out the ones that seem the most appropriate, and then I'll go ahead and pose the question, and the panel will answer them. Now, just to get something out of the way, because there's no need to waste that time, that I'm sure the question you're most thinking of is that, unfortunately, I'm not single. So you don't need to, that question you don't need to ask. All right, then. So you might ask yourself, why are we doing this? What's wrong with Governor Herbert's Energy Development Summit? And if you take a glance at the agenda, the truth is that there are 6 panels that will take place on Wednesday, which address renewable energy and energy efficiency. And there's groups and companies that we respect dearly that are participating in those. Groups like Utah Clean Energy and the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and a company called First Wind, which has brought more renewable energy to Utah than any other company. And those folks are participating, so that's great. And actually, it makes this year's summit, frankly, better than previous years. But here's what's not so great, and here's why we decided to bring you all here tonight and to bring this panel together. I'll read you the names of some of the other panels, not the renewable ones and not the energy efficiency ones. We have expediting oil and gas development. We have nuclear energy's role in addressing challenges. We have endangered species. We have tar sands and oil shale. We have public lands. And if you look through the panels that will be addressing those issues, it's pretty depressing. There's not a single person on any of those panels that's going to raise tough questions, that's going to be skeptical. Not a single person that's going to, make the point that maybe we should be prioritizing public health and the environment rather than a mad dash for profits. So we're here tonight to send a different message, which is to say that Utahns do care. Ordinary Utahns do care about their health, and they do care about their environment, and they do care about their air, and they do care about their wildlands and their beautiful spaces. And we're not going to be satisfied with just a few seats on some nice panels about windmills and insulation. We demand to be at the table when it comes to talking about oil sands and tar shale and nuclear and the sage grouse and all that stuff. We want to be a part of all of that, not just the nice little clean energy stuff on the side. One more point I want to make before we turn it over to our panelists, and I have a feeling I don't need to say this to this audience, but today's the right day to say it, and that is that this climate change thing is no joke. It really isn't. And here's a quick list of what's happening in Utah and what's going to keep happening. Stuff we're seeing now, stuff we're going to see a lot more of soon. And that's more drought, more forest fires, higher temperatures, decreased stream flows, earlier snowmelt, less snowmelt. All that stuff is happening and will keep happening, and it's super depressing. But an array of hope, you guys may know that the Obama administration and the EPA today announced rules to cut carbon pollution from our nation's power plants 30%. I did that, by the way. 30% from 2005 levels by 2030. Now, frankly, we'd love to see even deeper cuts. We'd like to see those rules go farther. But this is a solid, significant, important step in the right direction. And so we're really pleased about that. And so how will Herbert's Energy Summit deal with climate change? Will they be talking about the impact on our total carbon output of extracting and processing tar sands and oil shale production? Will they be talking about the imperative that we move away as quickly as we can from coal power? Lord, no. The session they have addressing this obliquely at this entire summit is entitled, quote, Impacts of Greenhouse Gas Regulations on Energy Production. Its panelists will discuss, quote, the costs of regulating greenhouse gases, and, quote, how those costs will affect Utah's economy. The speakers on that panel include two representatives of utilities, which are collectively, easily by far, the biggest carbon polluters in America, one attorney that works for industry, and then a state and federal official, which is at least a tiny bit of perhaps a voice, an independent voice. But who's not on that panel? There's no scientist, there's no climatologist, there's no water expert, there's no advocates, certainly, there's no fire specialist, there's no ski industry voice, there's no one like that. And so we felt obligated to bring some of those voices together, to bring folks that have other kinds of information tonight, and so we're really thrilled that you're here with us. So I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our panelists. We'll go one at a time, and I am super excited to introduce our first panelist, William Anderson. William, until recently, was the chairman of the Moapa Band of the Paiutes in southern Nevada, not too far from Las Vegas and St. George. If I can think of like the 4 or 5 words I'd string together to describe William, who I've gotten to know much better today, it would probably be something like Native American renewable energy guru. And I think those are like super cool words to put back to back. And I have to say that I've done a lot of writing over the years, and I've never quite strung those particular words together before. So I like that. That's pretty cool. He's got a really great story to tell, and we're so psyched that we could bring him here and that he was available. And so please join me in giving a warm round of applause to William Anderson. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hi. This has been one really crazy ride that I've been through, and I love telling this story because it keeps getting better. And I'm very proud to say that I was a part of this whole process to go ahead and get this completed on the reservation. But let's go back maybe 4 years ago when they approached me during that time to say that we're going to go ahead and build a solar plant on the reservation. And they told us, you can't do it. And I was like wondering why they would say that to me, but the second thing that they came up to say was that they go, you're not going to shut down that coal plant. That coal plant is going to be continuing on forever and forever until you guys are wiped out. And so I saw this as a challenge for me to go ahead and do something about it, to go ahead and see what the impacts were on our reservation. And I grew up on the reservation with that coal plant right next to us, and I didn't think anything about it. I just saw it there as an eyesore, and we just went ahead and played as close as we could and stayed away from there, really. But what happened was that we started noticing a lot of people were getting sick, and a lot of people were starting to die. And bless you. And so what happened was that we decided to go ahead and look to see what the problem was. And the ailments that these people had on our reservation, they were linked to coal. And at first I'm like going, well, it's very hard to go ahead and determine that's the answer. So we went ahead and looked for other reasons to go ahead and find out what else we could go ahead and link this to. And during that time is when the Sierra Club came on board to go ahead and help us out. And they helped us so much to go ahead and get more organized, to go ahead and get things accomplished. So from there, we started moving, and we started moving faster and faster. And then I was just talking about this just a moment ago, but the reservation, there's one street, Sigmiller Street, that's right there, that's closest to the coal plant. And then there's another person there, that's Calvin Myers and Russell Sampson. They lived there, the closest home, two brothers that lived right there. And then all of a sudden, Calvin, he was to me, he was walking all over on the reservation. He seemed healthy. And then all of a sudden he got a stroke. And he's not that old, or, he didn't seem to have any type of those problems, but he had it. And then from there, he had a heart attack. And the next thing you know, he's just been stuck in bed. And then he passed away. And then right after that, his brother passed away too. We had the local NBC people come over and just do a little story on the reservation. And when they showed Russell, he had all these different types of bottles of medication that he would take, and it was mostly dealing with his lungs. So it was, for me, it was just so frustrating to go ahead and see this happen. And then it got to the point where it was like, who do we know here on the reservation that has these lists of ailments? And then all of a sudden, it was just like, well, my cousin has this, and my aunt has that, and my nephew has this, breathing apparatus, and then we started looking, like going around to see that, another elder passed away, right next to the coal plant, and then all of a sudden across the street, another, person passed away, and then it was just getting scary for a while. It just seemed like every 2 months someone was passing away, and we decided to go ahead and do something about it. We went ahead with the Sierra Club, became more organized. We were able to go ahead and hold rallies. We were able to go ahead and walk from one point on our reservation to the Federal Building in Las Vegas. We did that twice. And the second time, we had Allison Chin, from the president of the Sierra Club, join us, as well as Congressman Horsford. So a lot of more people were paying attention to what we were doing. And so now we're rallying, we're getting people motivated, and so I went to Washington, D.C. to go ahead and see what I could do there. At first, it was a lot of problems that we faced and a lot of closed doors. And so we just kept on pushing. We kept on going to see what else we could do. Well, maybe we could talk to this senator, or maybe we talk to this congressman or congresswoman. We would do everything we could to go ahead and do this. I just kind of joke around because, every time I go to D.C., I still haven't seen the sites yet. It's always the EPA building. It's the Department of Energy. It's always all these different areas we would go to. So finally, it was Senator Reid that actually went ahead and opened the door for us. And he found out I was in Washington, D.C., and allowed me to speak. They told me I had 3 minutes. Senator Reid gave me 15. And that allowed the other senators to go ahead and hear what we were doing. That allowed everybody else to understand the fight we were having. It was David versus Goliath. We had a huge corporate entity trying to come after us. It was like all these attorneys were sitting right there, and there's just like 3 of us over here. And so they were really trying to go ahead and come after us and try to do what they can. But we still went ahead and we still pushed through. And so at the same time we're doing all this, we're decided, we're still working on solar. We want to go ahead and have more economic development on our reservation, and we want to go ahead and provide there's so many jobs. There was like 400 jobs. That's more people, more than we have on the reservation. We're over around roughly 340 people on our reservation, very small. So during that time, we just kept on pushing and pushing the whole thing, dealing with the whole solar plant too. And it was just surprising to see the Clean Energy Summit we had in Las Vegas, and to have first Senator Reid finally come out and disclose saying he wanted that coal plant shut down. Next presenter was Ken Salazar, Secretary of the Interior, and he went ahead and opened up and said, "I want that solar plant to be built on the reservation, and I want to make sure that it happens." And I'm like, wow. Me and my vice chair were just sitting there. I'm like, can you believe what they're saying? You know, we're just a small reservation out in the middle of nowhere. You know, I mean, when you drive past, you won't even see it. You'll see the coal plant. But what happened during that time was that they were finally able to go ahead and help us more and more with the whole solar plant. They were able to go ahead. We worked more and more with other departments in D.C., and we kept on moving, you know, one person to the next, and we kept on getting more and more people to go ahead and support us. And so finally, it just got to the point after, 2 years that we finally got our power purchase agreement with LADWP. And that was a huge feat for us because so many people were trying to go ahead and do this. And so many people wanted to go ahead and have that on their land. And I'm very proud to say that this was the very first industrial scale solar plant in Indian country. We are the first to do this. And it was just so amazing. Thank you. But it was just for me, it's so heartwarming to go ahead and have them actually say that. Because right now, we could go back. We could go back to the Public Utility Commission of Nevada, Southern Nevada, and tell them that we have a solution. We could go ahead and shut down that coal plant, and we could provide solar energy. We don't have to destroy the earth. We don't have to go ahead ruin our water. We don't have to go ahead and destroy our heritage, destroy our culture, destroy our people of who we are. Because many times they try to go ahead and do what they could to discourage us, and that coal plant was the last one because it was killing our people. It was killing our people so much that I was just getting frustrated with everything that was happening. And so now we had that going with the solar plant. And so we kept on holding more rallies. We kept on talking to more people. We kept on trying to, anybody that would listen to me, I would try to go ahead and talk to them, just to go ahead and see where they're at. And then more doors opened up for us. And then last year, my final year, my term, it was just amazing to go ahead and see so many doors open for us, to go ahead and say that we support you. We support your tribe. To go ahead and have them say, you know, they sent their aide to go ahead and say, you know, bring Chairman Anderson over. We want to talk to him. You know, a whole line of people, very important people that wanted to talk to the senator, but they would go ahead and allow me to go ahead and speak. So it was just heartwarming to go ahead and feel that the people are now supporting what we were trying to do. And so we kept on doing everything else we could to go ahead and help our people. You know, we tried to go ahead and do a lot of medical, we brought a doctor in to go ahead and just see, you know, what we could do to go ahead and check all our people. And we had so many people that was willing to go ahead and help us out. And we finally got enough people to go ahead and do the type of studies that we were looking for. And so around that time that we kept on pushing it forward and forward, and then all of a sudden, this was last year in March, I was just sitting in my office, and then I get a call from the CEO of MV Energy. And so he calls me up, and he just called me to say, he goes, I want to personally tell you that we're going to shut down that coal plant. And right there on the line was Congressman Horsford to go ahead and be a witness to say that he's going to do that. And so my jaw just dropped. I just couldn't believe it. I scared my staff because as soon as I hung up, I was yelling for joy because we actually shut down a coal plant. We took on the corporate entity that was destroying our people. We did this, a small band. We accomplished this. We were able to go ahead and do this. And this story that I'm telling, I hope that motivates people out there to go ahead and do that on their own. I mean, I see the struggles that happens here in Utah, and you know, there's so many things that could be done, but yet, you know, again, it's always getting people motivated to go to do these things, and you know, this is a good-sized crowd of people right here that, you know, could go ahead and do things. You know, you'd be so surprised to see what you can accomplish when you go ahead and just keep struggling to go ahead and do the things you can to go ahead and help your people. I mean, there was a elementary school just not too far from the coal plant too. That was right in the wind path, and you know, we're telling, like, your kids are breathing this coal dust. You know, we get 40 to 60 miles an hour wind that blows on the reservation, and then it blows on the mesa, which goes through the whole area there, and blows to the valley where a lot of population of the people live in Moapa. And so we keep telling them this, and we try to go ahead and get people to understand what we're trying to do, to let them know what, you know, the problems are, what these people are facing, that, you know, from coughing to breathing to just, you know, just the simple things in life, to breathe clean air. You know, it sounds so ridiculous, but it's true. I mean, we want to go ahead and make sure that we want to do the things that's right for our people, not to go ahead and just, you know, burn the money that's going to go ahead and power Las Vegas, where we don't even get any of that energy. We get none of that energy that goes through that power plant. And so through there, it just gets us more and more organized to find out what we could do to go ahead and tackle this issue. So it was just so hard to go ahead and do all this work, but I was just so amazed. And what happened just recently too was that we were working on a second solar plant, and now it's going to happen too. So we're going to be the reservation that has the two largest solar plants in Indian country today. So, you know, that was something that we wanted to go ahead and do. So now we got the second plant going. You know, first one was 250 megawatts. That's over 190,000 homes that it could power. The second project we're working on is 150 megawatts. So it's a lot of power that we're generating. And again, we're proving to them that there's alternate ways to go ahead and produce energy without destroying our lives and our people and our generations of, like my son, you know, I just make sure that I go ahead and make sure that he has the right to breathe clean air, you know. And so we started moving with that second project, and now that's happening. And then we started introducing a new bill that we're able to go ahead and stop coal from being placed in the state of Nevada. And it was just a small group of people that went ahead and just stood up and just said, no more. No more of this. No more of our people dying. No more of our children having inhalers. No more of having these so many problems dealing with heart attacks and strokes and everything that's out there. And so we accomplished what we could, and now, since I'm no longer chair for the Moapa Band of Paiutes, what happened is that a lot of people, a lot of tribes have been asking me to go ahead and say, you know, we want to do what you did. And so what I did is I just went ahead and formed my own company to go ahead and be a consultant, to go ahead and have other tribes across the country to work on renewable energy. I wanted to have them the same opportunity that we had, so they could have economic development on their land, so they could go ahead and do what we always like to do, is protect Mother Earth. We want to go ahead and do that. So just starting it out, just to go ahead and have so many people have faith in what we're trying to do. And it just keeps continuing on, because right now they're supposed to shut down units 1, 2, and 3. We're going to be there to go ahead and watch every step they make and make sure they do it right. And what happens too is they do a full remediation. They're going to completely take everything out right there from the soil that's destroying our land, and have that removed. And right now, it's just so funny to have NV Energy say that they want to work in renewable energy. They're thinking about having solar on their land, on where that coal plant is. So, you know, from one point to someone say it can't be done twice, and now to the point where we are the leaders, we set the template for all the other tribes across the country to go ahead and follow in our footsteps. And I'm just so glad to be here today to go ahead and tell the story. You know, I'm so glad to be here with so many people, and you know, it just makes me feel good that people want to come out to go ahead and do what they can to protect their homes, protect their families, protect their kids. And it's something that it just makes me so proud to say that, you know, we accomplished something that people said could never be done. And I just want to go ahead and thank everybody from HEAL, and I want to thank everybody else that's been supportive of what we've been trying to do. And I want to thank all of you for showing up tonight. And my name is William Anderson, and I'm a member of the White Band of Paiutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Willem. What a great way to start tonight. Our next speaker is Tim Wagner. Tim was born as a German composer born in 1813, who's best known for the 4-opera cycle Der Ring der Nibelbaum. Oh, it's a different Wagner. It's a different Wagner. I'm sorry. It's Tim Wagner. Tim Wagner, who is a tireless activist for many years here in Utah. Tim has had his fingerprints on some of the most innovative and successful activism here in Utah in recent years, whether it's clean air, tar sands and oil shale, which we'll hear about today, or gay marriage. Tim, as you may know, is at the heart of that recent fight as well. So let's give a warm welcome to Tim Wagner from the Sierra Club. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. I almost didn't make it today because I was busy composing another number. But I decided this was pretty important. I just want to also give a shout out to William. A little bit of history goes back my way on that, because back around 2008, 2009, 2010, I was doing a lot of media consulting for a variety of coal-related campaigns around the West, and the Reed Gardner coal plant was one of them. And in those days, it was pretty interesting to see it play out, because NV Energy and the governor of Nevada, they were pretty admirable opponents to be going up against, especially with such a small group of people. And so it's really warms my heart to come here tonight and listen to William's story and to see this come full circle, because I will always repeat what William said. One of the biggest points he makes, which I think is incredibly important to remember, is that is what a small group of people, dedicated people, can do and how you can make a difference. So never lose sight of that. So let me pull out the little, whatchamacallit? I think this works, doesn't it? So I'm just going to basically give you a quick rundown, kind of an inventory of what we are currently experiencing and what we can expect that's coming at us in terms of what's known as both unconventional fuels as well as oil and gas in the state of Utah. It's not a pretty picture. I will say that right up front. But I will also say that we have a real opportunity here to make a big difference, and that's partly what this meeting is here tonight is about. So don't get your spirits down. We got to plow forward, and we can fight this, and we can achieve victory, just like what William cited here a little bit ago. So, but the point of this is there are some who really firmly believe that Utah can be the dirty energy capital of the West. And I believe that we can do better. Let me see here a minute. There we go. Is this not going to work? Okay. What am I doing wrong, Christopher? Oh, there. Okay. There. Okay. Sorry, I'm technologically not advanced, but bear with me. So what we're basically talking about here in Utah, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen an image like this or similar, it's known as the Green River Formation. It's a major geological formation that overlays 3 states, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. and the biggest chunk is in our great state here. Roughly 16,000 square miles, largest known deposit of oil shale, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, and estimated to contain about almost 2 trillion barrels of oil, depending on who you get the numbers from. This is a map that came out of the BLM's programmatic EIS that they did in 2008 that shows what's going on in Utah within the Green River Formation. The two things you need to pay attention to here is all the bright red is tar sands deposits, the known tar sands deposits, and the medium blue is all oil shale. So you can see it covers a lot of ground. This came out of, like I said, the BLM programmatic EIS that was released, I believe, in 2011. That came about, a little bit of history came about from 2005 or so, 2006, when the Bush administration was, you know, in the heyday of giving their Christmas gifts to the fossil fuels industry. And one of the things that they left office with in 2008 was a direct order to the BLM to lay open 2 million acres within the Green River Formation across the 3-state region for oil shale and tar sands development. The Sierra Club and a group of other organizations filed suit against that decision, got the BLM convinced to back away from that original 2 million acre commitment. And eventually they came out with a new order in 2011, where they scaled that back to about 800,000 acres available for oil shale and tar sands, but also with a major stipulation that anything that they would permit would only be experimental or test projects. They could not go ahead and permit full-scale development projects unless they could prove that it was economically viable. And that's kind of where we are today. So, of course, the big thing is oil shale. How do you get oil from Iraq? I mean, that's the $60,000 question in my mind. Still hasn't been answered, but there's a lot of companies are trying. Below there, I have a list of some of the major projects going on in Utah right now that are at least in the development stages. This is not all of them, I can guarantee, but these are some of the major players. Enefit is the biggest one. They're the Estonian company. You often hear Rob Bishop talking about, well, Estonia has been making oil shale available for oil for years and years. Yeah, they've been burning it like coal. It's only recently, within the last couple of years, they've started to develop technologies where they can actually extract the kerogen out of oil shale. And just a brief geological history. This stuff is really young on the geological scale, if you don't know. I mean, if you compared this with coal, coal is millions and millions of years older than this stuff is. So it has not morphed into something that's actually usable to actually get usable products out of it. You have to boil this stuff to around 700 to 800 degrees for upwards of 3 to 4 months, and then you get what's called kerogen, which is like a waxy substance similar to shoe polish. And then you have to refine it further and further into some type of a crude that's usable. Lots of energy and lots of water. It's not an economically viable product. Companies have been trying to do this for over 100 years. But we're probably as close as we've ever been, partly because the price of crude oil keeps going up and up and up. And as the price of crude gets further and further up the scale, the closer we get to this stuff actually being able to produce it and make a profit. But Enefit is the company that has holdings on about 60,000 acres of leased lands in eastern Utah over near the Colorado border that was shown on that previous map. The Estonian government is backing it, and that's one of the biggest problems. A lot of these companies, they go after private investment dollars. Estonia doesn't have to do that. They're funding it themselves. The other one is Red Leaf Resources. They are currently working on a project. Literally today got their final permits, which we are appealing, thank you. And we will continue to appeal and fight that project. I could go into long details, but maybe we can talk about that during the Q&A session. And then a couple of smaller ones that are also in the development stages. That is an actual photograph from an Estonian oil shale mining project. And this, I wanted to show this diagram. This is what Red Leaf Resources is doing. They have developed what they call an eco shell, a nice name for a really, really dirty project. And basically what it involves is a large pit dug in the ground, and I'll show another photograph of this, where they line the pit with about 3 foot thick of bentonite clay, and then they lay a bottom steel pan in the bottom, and then they start piling the oil shale rock by the tons, by the tons, by the tons, and they lace all this with these huge ducts, sheet metal ducts, where they pipe in heat upwards of 900 degrees using natural gas, and they heat this stuff for a period of 3 to 4 months. And then they collect the kerosene that drips down into the bottom, they pull the kerosene out somehow, and then they leave the whole mass of residue and all the boiled rocks and everything in the pit, and they cover it up and bury it and walk away. And no one's holding them accountable to what this really means for the long term and for the watershed. Here's an actual pit being constructed right now in eastern Utah. It's a test pit, but they are going forward with this. And then the other major unconventional, dirty energy is tar sands. You've all heard about tar sands from the Alberta tar sands and associated with the Keystone XL pipeline. Very controversial, of course. I tell people, if you want to really talk about tar sands, come to Utah. It's ground zero, folks. This is where it's going to happen. If it's going to happen at all in the U.S., this is going to happen right here in our state. There's a lot of it here, and you've got major companies going after this stuff in a big, big way. Tar sands is just what it says. It's basically tar mixed with sand or dirt. The difference between the Alberta tar sands and the tar sands in Utah is the tar sands in Alberta is basically, it has more of a dirt substrate versus sand. And hence they use a lot of water, a lot of hot water to separate the bitumen from the substrate. And that's why you've got, anybody can go online, if you haven't seen them do it, you can see these huge masses of tailings ponds and piles of refuge from the Alberta tar sands. Major catastrophe. I contest next to climate change. This is the largest environmental disaster on the face of the earth. You can literally see it from satellite images. The area now being disturbed for Alberta tar sands is over 5 times the size of Metro Washington, D.C., to give you a scale of what this is like. But the difference between the tar sands here in Utah is because it's mixed in with sand, much more difficult to separate the bitumen from the substrate. Hence, the company that is actually has the first permitted project is U.S. Oil Sands in the PR Springs over in the Book Cliffs area. And that project is going to be using what they call an orange peel solvent that will supposedly separate the bitumen from the sand. And because it comes from orange peel, the company will say over and over again, it's not toxic, will not cause any problems, you don't have to worry about it. The problem isn't in the solvent. The problem is in the fact that you release the hydrocarbons. No matter how you do it, when you release the hydrocarbons, they become mobile, they get into your water, they can go anywhere. You could take a chunk of coal right now, put it in a glass of water, and you could drink that glass of water. Because that chunk of coal is basically inert. It's in the form that it can't separate. You might get a little bit of a headache or nausea, but it's not going to kill you. The problem of it is if you put a solvent, like a citrix-based solvent, into that coal, it loosens the hydrocarbon molecules and suddenly they become mobile, and then they're going anywhere they want to go. And that's the problem. And that in itself is the problem with U.S. Oil Sands argument. So when you hear them say, oh, we're using orange peels, okay, what about the traveling, the mobile hydrocarbons? You're not talking about that, and they won't talk about it. So then the other component I wanted to just give you guys an update on is the current oil and gas boom. And this probably concerns me more than anything else, to be quite honest with you. You can read some of these stats. Roughly, we have 11,000 active oil and gas wells currently going on in Utah. Approximately 95% of those are being fracked. And each one of those frack wells uses roughly 1 million to 4 million gallons of water per well. Do the math on that. Another 20 to 25,000 are being proposed in the next 20 years in the state of Utah. The Monument View Newfield project, which is literally right on the Green River, They're doing an EIS on that right now. That is a project that will just blow your mind when you look at it. It's just unbelievable what they're looking at doing. Ouray National Wildlife Refuge, a project that we've currently submitted comments on. 2 major projects being proposed on the wildlife refuge. If that doesn't sound preposterous, I don't know what does. The next one I really want to bring people's attention to because it affects us directly, and that is the Avenequin Canyon project that's being proposed. 640 oil and gas wells on 34,000 acres. That's near the Strawberry River, right in the watershed. That's the water, one of the sources of water that feeds a lot of Utahns along the Wasatch Front. Very, very serious project. Gasco is another one that's been approved. 1,300 wells near the Green River. Some of them wells would be drilled in the proposed Desolation Canyon Wilderness. And then the one that I think people need to really start paying attention to is the Paradox Basin, and that's in the Moab and San Juan County areas. We currently have about 8 or 9 wells being that are producing down just in and around, not in, but north of Island in the Sky and Canyonlands National Park. And supposedly one of those wells is the largest producing oil well in the U.S. right now. The Paradox Basin is the next area that the industry has their sights set on. And it's extremely concerning because, and I know I've got some good friends here from Moab here tonight, this is a big concern to a lot of people down there because this is an area where obviously Moab has become the center of the universe as far as I'm concerned in terms of southern Utah, Red Rock Canyon country, outdoor recreation, you name your pleasure. And that's where it happens, folks. And that area is now currently being threatened with huge industrialization if we don't get a handle on this. It's a major deal. So love to talk more about that as we get time. Back up. I just want to throw this up, just to put it in perspective. Cody Stewart's going to be at the governor's economic summit, I can guarantee it. He's the man behind the orders. And what he's talking about is serious. And so we need to pay attention to this. What's going on in North Dakota? Do a little research. It's not a pretty sight. Culturally and economically, it's a disaster. I mean, they might be throwing tons of money into the state coffers right now, but they're going to make major regrets over that in the future. And we don't want that to happen to Utah. So pay attention to that. So I'll leave it at that. You know, lots of information here. I could go on and on about the issues associated with air quality and the refinery expansions and the heavy trucks that we're seeing now coming in on Highway 40 into Utah or into Salt Lake County. And we're going to see more and more of those pipeline constructions. We are experiencing some major changes that's happening right before our very eyes. So get involved, and you can make a difference. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tim. Like his German composer forefather, Tim went a little long, but you know, that'll be all right. So important stuff. I'm realizing we should have William go last because William has the hopeful story, and now Tim's got us all wanting to crawl into something. All right, I'm pleased to introduce Rebecca Walsh. Rebecca is the Western Project Manager for the National Parks Conservation Association. I've lived in Utah for 7 years, and I'm a newspaper guy. I used to work at newspapers, read the newspaper every day, and of course we all love the Tribune. That's a whole separate story, but you all should be paying attention to that. And I have to say that to me, the finest columnist we've had in my 7 years here was Rebecca. It was a big bummer when she left, but the cool thing is she's back, and now she's an environmental activist. So let's give Rebecca a big applause.
Yes. Okay. I apologize in advance if I have a coughing fit. I'm fighting a cold. So my assignment was to talk about coal because that's what NPCA is focused on most specifically in Utah is fighting for greater protections on the existing coal-fired power plants that we have in the state. Utah's history with coal is a long and colorful one. The state's coal mines are responsible for much of the state's early ethnic diversity as miners from Italy and Greece, the Slavic states, and South America immigrated to Utah throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries for job prospects. Their descendants influenced everything from our restaurant choices and religious edifices to the influence of organized labor on politics in the state. But the lingering 21st century impact of coal is much less charming. More than 2/3 of Utah's power, 78% according to the EPA, is generated by coal-fired power plants. 4 of the state's dirtiest coal-fired power plant stacks spew 12.2 million tons of carbon dioxide a year, more than 6,000 tons of sodium dioxide, and 19,000 tons of nitrous oxide. Those are the precursors for the ozone and particulate pollution that plague the state's urban areas and wild places alike. In 2008, Utah's coal-fired power plants were implicated in just over 40 deaths, nearly 900 asthma attacks, and more than 6,000 lost work days a year. Since then, the plants have improved slightly. Utah's coal legacy doesn't have to continue this way. It's my hope that we can prod Governor Gary Herbert and the Department of Environmental Quality Director Amanda Smith to hold the state's coal-fired power plants to the best cleanup standards, requiring improvements that will clean the air and ultimately transition Utah power customers to cleaner sources of energy. We have 2 upcoming opportunities for action. Utah has to respond to the EPA's rejection of its guidelines for coal-fired power plants. We also have to respond to this new greenhouse gas rule that the White House announced today. First, I'll talk about the rule for power plants. NPCA's Clear Air program hinges on the Clean Air Act's regional haze rule, which requires states to protect the air in 156 Class 1 areas. Those are basically national parks and wilderness areas. Utah has 5: Arches, Canyonlands, Bryce, Capitol Reef, and Zion. Those parks generated nearly $600 million in tourism economy for 2012. In an effort to preserve the park's iconic vistas and keep the tourists coming, Congress originally required that the air in those parks would return to natural conditions by the year 2064. Many states are well off the mark, including Utah. For example, before the federal government stepped in to require stricter emission standards in Arizona, Saguaro National Park was not projected to return to natural air quality conditions for more than 600 years. By the year 2600, Saguaro will still not be at natural conditions. Crater Lake in Oregon was nearly 300 years away from natural visibility. We don't have any examples from Utah because the state still has not responded and met the requirements of the regional haze rule. I can't give you how long it would take Arches or Canyonlands to be back to natural visibility. So this is our chance. This summer, HEAL, the Sierra Club, NPCA, and others are working on a public information and organizing campaign to persuade Utah air regulators to put in place strong air quality standards on the state's remaining coal-fired power plants. If you care about clean air in Arches and Canyonlands and in the state generally, write a letter to Governor Herbert or Director Smith and tell them. If you don't believe that will do any good, write to the regional EPA administrator in Denver. His name is Sean McGrath, and he's going to have to respond to what the state comes up with. The state's deadline is the end of this year, December, and then it will be in the EPA's hands. President Obama's new climate action plan announced this morning is another opportunity for action. The EPA guidelines are meant to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from coal-fired power plants by 30% by 2030. A new rule will be drafted by next summer. The coal industry already plans to appeal. The breathing public also needs to be heard. In 2012, EPA estimated Utah's carbon dioxide emissions were 28 million metric tons from the affected power plants. Those power plants produce 34 terawatt hours of power. So the state's emission rate was 1,813 pounds per megawatt hour. The EPA proposes cutting that to 1,322 pounds per megawatt hour by 2030. That's essentially a 30% cut. Utah gets to choose how to meet that goal. And given their response to the regional haze rule, we have serious concerns. We can work with other states. We could demand energy efficiency programs, renewable energy standards, switching to natural gas, energy conservation, or retirement of the oldest, most inefficient plants. But this decision is up to the scientists who work at DEQ and their bosses, Amanda Smith, Governor Herbert, and the legislature. Again, this is where you come in. Director Smith and Governor Herbert will be monitoring and directing the state environmental scientists who will brainstorm how to reach this goal. Let them know what you'd like to see, what you'd like to breathe. It wouldn't hurt to remind them that just under 2% of the state's energy comes from hydropower. Another 2% is generated by wind, 17% comes from natural gas, and just under 1% from geothermal sources. We have to shift that balance. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This is such solid information, and you know, at the Energy Summit on Wednesday, you're going to hear these things presented as problems blocking progress. And of course, what they really are is opportunities to clean up our air and protect our families. So we really appreciate that great information from Rebecca and Tim and everyone. Before I introduce the last speaker, let's remind about the questions and the envelopes and the pens. So Sophia and Lindsay are back there. If you have your question written out, go ahead and pass it to the end of the aisle and hold it up, and Sophia and Lindsay will grab those. If you require paper and pen to write a question, why don't you go ahead and raise your hand and they'll get that to you. Again, remember, you're getting an envelope, but really it's a recycled piece of paper to write on the envelope. So allow me to introduce our last speaker, Christopher Thomas, HEAL's Executive Director. I think HEAL has a really great reputation in Utah, and I think people look at us and wonder, how does a small nonprofit stay so stable? You know, how do we keep a good staff? How do we, you know, remain so professional, put on good events, maintain a good list, you know, continue to do really good work and have victories and move forward? And the truth is that it's not an accident, it's not luck, it's not, you know, bestowed on us by the gods. It's because of the great leaders over the years who, with a steady hand, have really moved us just to be the strong, professional, great organization we are. And you know those names. It's Chip, it's Jason, it's Vanessa, and now it's Christopher. And he's fantastic, and we're thrilled to have him as our leader. So let's give a warm round of applause to Christopher Thomas.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's so great to see so many of you. We've got state representatives here. We've got HEAL supporters. We've got other environmental activists. I've got folks from my church, Holiday United Church of Christ, here. Thank you for coming. So it's just so nice to see all of you. My name is Christopher Thomas. I'm the Executive Director of HEAL Utah. And I want to talk to you a little bit tonight about renewable energy. Because the truth is, there's a real dichotomy in the way that sometimes it's talked about in Utah and what the reality is. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that tonight. So one thing that will be said over and over again at the Energy Development Summit is that Utah is a great place to do business. And you will hear things like these quotes, Utah is a rich abundance of diverse natural resources, both renewables and others. So some lip service paid to renewable energy. Or things like, have you guys heard the term all of the above approach to energy? Let's just do it all. We see some lip service paid to that from our governor. He said that in the context of being the chair of the Western Governors Association. But you have to ask the question, is Utah a good place for renewable energy businesses? Well, the numbers tell a really sad story. So I asked the question, how does Utah rank among our Western neighbors when it comes to renewable energy production? And I went back and I looked at a federal data set, the Energy Information Administration. I love looking at these things. And so I looked at 2012, that's the last full year that there's data. And here's how it shakes out. We are dead last in renewable energy production as of 2012 among all of our Western neighbors. That is not good for business. Now, let's ask a slightly different question. How does Utah rank when it comes to the percent of the total power produced in the state that's from fossil fuel sources? So this is a good state to do dirty energy business. This is not a good state to do renewable energy business. Not yet. If you look at the total percent of all the energy generation that comes from fossils, divided by all the energy produced in the state, it's 95%. That's staggering and a huge missed opportunity. Now, something I noticed as I looked through all this data, because I didn't just do it for the western U.S., I looked at all the states in the country. And if you look at those states that have a fairly high percent of the total power they produce coming from renewables, these are not necessarily what you consider bastions of progressivism, right? These are states who realize that renewable energy is a solid business proposition and that people want to buy the power. And so they look to develop it. And we've not seen that mindset shift in Utah yet, but we hope to. One other thing I wanted to point out, and I think this is really sad, and actually it makes me correspondingly really thrilled to hear William Anderson's story, to think what they were able to achieve in terms of solar. If you look at our western neighbors, these are the total megawatts of utility scale solar power. Utah doesn't have a single, not one utility scale solar project operating in the state. That's crazy. We've got great solar resources. And it makes you realize, this can be done, but what we've been lacking is the political will to make it happen. And again, it's a huge missed business opportunity. So for a moment, I want to talk about Rocky Mountain Power. So how many of you are customers of Rocky Mountain Power? Raise your hand. Okay. Well, I'm hopefully going to tell you something you may not already know, because, knowledge, this sounds corny, but it's true. Knowledge is power. You have to have the facts marshaled before you can really go out and advocate and make change sometimes. Not all the technical details, just some big high-level pieces of information. So here we are in Utah, and if you live in Utah and you're a Rocky Mountain Power customer, I'm going to show you where your power comes from. And don't be scared yet. So do you see all of this stuff that's snaking all across the West? The truth is, our power comes from a giant system that spans 8 states. And these guys represent coal plants, natural gas plants, hydroelectric dams, geothermal, and then wind. So you can see as you survey, coal plants here, several in Utah, kind of all in this line. Some natural gas plants here, some wind here and here, and a lot of hydroelectric too. So it's a big system, and so it's not as simple as to say, well, our power, where our power comes from is the same as where all of Utah's generating is. Well, that's not really true, because our power comes from all of these sources, and that's good and bad, and I'm going to tell you why. So if you look at 2013, last year, where our energy came from, once you add up all these different sources, here's what it looks like. 65% from coal, 10 from gas, 7, 8, and then 10 from renewable energy. This is a good thing in a way because it's way better than Utah's renewable energy mix, right? But it's also bad because if you project out 10 years down the road, it really doesn't get that much better. In fact, our share of energy from renewable sources will go down. And that's largely because Rocky Mountain Power has said they don't plan to build any new large-scale renewable facilities for the next 10 years. This is crazy. Renewable energy is getting so much cheaper every year, and yet that doesn't appear to be the way the business minds at Rocky Mountain Power want to move the company. And what's particularly striking about that is that if you survey Utahns, and it doesn't matter what party they are, they want to buy wind and solar. In fact, solar is the top. They don't want to be buying their power from dirty energy sources. And we here along the Wasatch Front, I think more than a lot of people, understand the connection between when we put dirty stuff in the air, we end up breathing it later. And so we can be a very powerful voice for saying, we want to buy renewable energy. Let us have the chance to buy it. The other kind of fascinating thing, fascinating and horrible, is that when you look at the entire western United States and you look at all the different utilities that operate, it turns out that Rocky Mountain Power Pacificor is the #1 air polluter. The #1 air polluter in the entire western US. We are their customers and we give them money every month. We need to know that in order to ask them for something different, to ask that to change. And that's true with sulfur dioxides, nitrous oxides, mercury, but also carbon pollution. So I want to say something else about Rocky Mountain Power. Several of you have probably heard that Rocky Mountain Power has proposed a new penalty, financial penalty for those who install solar panels on their own houses. And it is $425 a month, but could only then go up after then. The reason we're so concerned about this is that, remember how I told you Rocky Mountain Power is doing pretty much nothing to move renewable energy forward over the next 10 years? These rooftop solar owners are making precisely the investment that our utility should, and they're doing it using their own money. And doing so is benefiting all of us because it means Rocky Mountain Power doesn't have to produce as much power. It means less pollution. It means jobs, quite frankly, to install those solar panels. So to then go ahead and penalize them when they're doing the right thing seems absolutely ludicrous to us. And so we are working with a group of rooftop solar owners, and we've hosted an action page at my-energy-choice.org, where you can go online and you can send an email that will go both to the Utah Public Service Commission, telling them, do not approve, please do not approve this new solar penalty, and it will copy the email to Rich Walge, who is the president of Rocky Mountain Power. So you still have over a month to get those comments in, but do it tonight when you get home. It'll make you feel better, I promise. We have to channel our energies into productive things. Otherwise it can become quite, it can become challenging at times to do this. Okay, so we've talked about Rocky Mountain Power. Several of our speakers tonight have mentioned the fact that the EPA today announced these new limits on carbon pollution for coal power plants. And this is the most significant climate-related action I have yet seen. Now, it doesn't get us where we need to be, but it's a very solid step in the right direction. And you will see playing out over the next weeks and months a war for public opinion. And I want you to be mobilized and aware, because if we don't speak up in support of what the EPA is doing, we could very well lose this. Now, I'm encouraged by the fact that President Obama has said this is one of his top priorities for his second term, but the EPA has announced rules before and then pulled them back because they became unpopular. And the sort of the Fox News bubbles of the world, basically gained enough strength that these rules were pulled back. So I want to tell you about one particular thing. I read the Washington Post pretty religiously, and it's got some really great features. One of them is called Fact Checker. The other one's called Wonk Blog. But the Fact Checker ran a piece recently, and what they did is they fact-checked a new ad that was being put out by one of these big pro-coal industry groups. And the ad is a radio ad, and it says, Hear that? That's the sound of people opening their electric bills to discover they've nearly doubled. So you can read on, but what they're trying to do and what we'll see is an attempt to scare all of us into believing that we can't have a clean environment and have affordable power. And that's simply not the case. And thankfully, the fact checker rigorously reviewed those claims and then reviewed the actual situation and gave it 4 Pinocchios, which I believe is their highest rating for something not passing the fact checker smell test. And one of the main reasons why this is not true is that, well, you guys all probably know this. What's the cheapest way to cut pollution? It's to not waste energy. And not only does that cause less pollution, it saves money. So in fact, these rules could actually be used to save money for your average household because it's more efficient. So I'll end it there. I think I went a little over time, but thank you for coming tonight. It's great to talk to you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Christopher. What a great panel so far. We're really, really thrilled. We're going to jump into the questions, but before we do, I want to let you folks know about another panel happening in 2 days, so not tomorrow, but the next day, Wednesday afternoon, 3:30 to 6 o'clock. And interestingly enough, the Governor's Energy Summit has as its keynote speaker an environmentalist. But it's an environmentalist who's pro-nuclear and pro-fracking. So it may be a somewhat confusing label to those of us who consider ourselves environmentalists. But he is, to be fair, a fairly interesting guy named Ted Nordhaus. And so some wonderful environmental folks from the Salt Lake community, folks you know, like Hans Ehrbar and Dave Foland and Joe Andrade and others, have organized a sort of discussion between Mr. Nordhaus and Utah Voices. And that'll happen here Wednesday, 3:30 p.m., same room. Come back Wednesday afternoon. That should be super interesting. Okay, I said that the speakers would do about 45 minutes. They had so much to say. Let's just say they went a little longer. So we are going to do what I'm calling the lightning round, okay? Because we're not going to be here forever. Information gets to be too much after a little while. So I am going to be a tough moderator. And so we're going to read some questions. I'm going to call upon the person over there, and you're going to get a couple minutes to answer it. And if you go longer than that, I'm turning off your microphone. You got that? So we're going to start with William. William, how did you finance that solar power plant?
It was through the developer. What happened was that we could have $1.2 billion to produce this plant. So the developers were the ones that came in and funded the project. And it just ended up where we were the landowners and they were the ones, the developers. So it started out very good for us. And then all of a sudden, the price of solar dropped. And so we had to make the changes in our lease agreement too. And it didn't come out very nice until we played hardball. We went ahead and called their bluffs and ended up to be right down the middle. In 10 years, once it's completed, they're going to sell to LADWP. All the millions that's going to be sold, the profits are going to be split 50-50. So the tribe will receive, as much as they can from the sale of the plant. So it is something that we were very happy to go through. So that was it.
Great. Thank you, William. I'm going to direct this next question to Tim. And Wagner, try to be a little short here. It's a complicated question, though. How much energy does it take to produce the oil from shale and sand? Does it require more energy to produce that stuff than it'll actually create?
That's a great question. Yes, as a matter of fact, it does. Most of the analyses that I've seen shows that oil shale and tar sands both are net energy losers. In other words, on your energy budget, a certain percent goes in and a certain percent comes out. And generally, it's a net loser. And that's the same thing actually with the Alberta tar sands project as well. But because they have been able to acquire the leases of the land and aren't paying the full cost of their operations and the externalities, it becomes cheaper for them and more profitable. But yes, both. The direct answer to your question is yes. Both are net energy losers.
Great. We've got a few questions that are similar, so I think I'll paraphrase them a bit. And Christopher, this was your name was written on one of these, and I'm outing you as a member of a faith-based community. I hope that's okay. Some folks have asked about the potential to motivate and organize and draw upon the resources of faith-based spiritual communities in these different fights. So what potential is there, and if any of the other three of you want to add, but Christopher, you want to start with that?
It's high. Can I go on? Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I was, I belong to a church called Holiday United Church of Christ, and at the last Sunday's service, the youth organized it. We have a very active youth group, and they organized it all around themes about the earth. And the youth who spoke, a very gifted young man named Wiley, talked about the fact that we need to be doing a lot more to help preserve the climate, not because the world is in jeopardy, but because we are in jeopardy. Our ability to live here is what's at stake. And it was very touching. And I think especially, I think among a lot of faith communities, and I can say personally from our faith community, the ideas of justice and having a voice and living in reconciliation with the earth and with each other are very powerful themes. And so I think that makes a very natural place to activate and organize and try to work for a better energy future.
Great. A question, there's a couple again, and we'll direct this to Rebecca, but essentially about, how do we respond to the charge that reducing coal power, reducing emissions from coal power plants, phasing them out is a crippling blow to our economy? How do we sort of take on the jobs argument?
I think it's a specious argument. I think if you replace coal with renewable energy jobs, that it's a wash. And I think that's an easy case to make. And those are good, high-paying jobs, just like coal-fired power